In this video, we're going to take a look at AXIS 2013 Chapter 2 Skill-Based Training. We're going to go into a little more depth than we did in the prior training, and in this one we're going to look at the way the data is structured. We're going to look at some basics of querying, and we're also going to import some data from Excel and from Access. First thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new database using the blank desktop database template, and we're going to save that database in the My Documents folder. It's the default location here, A02H1 Bank, and then click Create. We're going to create a new field in this brand new table that's created for us, and we'll click to add, and we want that to be a short text data type. This gives us the ability, when we're creating these different fields, to specify exactly what type of data should be in that field. It helps us limit down what type of stuff is going to go in there. Maybe sometimes we only want dates and times. Maybe sometimes we just want a yes or no. In this case, short text gives us the most flexibility because it can be letters, numbers, special characters. Really anything you can type can go in this field. And this field is going to be named Branch ID. And I'll tab over, and now I'm going to save this table. Right click on Table and Save, and I'm going to save it with the name Branch. So now I have a new table, and I'm going to start creating these branch IDs. But in this one, you're going to notice My IT Lab is actually skipping a lot of the steps that you would normally have to do if you were doing the hands-on activity in the book. A lot of the stuff that you would normally type in by hand, creating this from scratch, is done for you, so you can focus really on the real important points. With this table open, we're going to delete the ID field. I'm going to right click and delete the row. My IT Lab and Access are warning us here, do you really want to delete this field? If we do, all of the data associated with that field is going to get wiped out permanently. So this is no small thing. In the real world, you're going to want to be very careful if you do this, because once it's gone, it's gone. But we're going to say yes here. And the other warning that comes up has to do with deleting the primary key. Now, a primary key is the one unique piece of data in that database, in that table, that ties that record to its data. Everybody has a unique driver's license. Everyone has a unique social security number. Everyone has various unique numbers. Maybe your bank account number. They're all unique IDs, and it's not based on your name. Somebody else might have the same name. It's not based on where you live, or sometimes not even your phone number. We need to base things on something that we can guarantee is unique. So when we're talking about this particular entity, we know we're talking about the right one, even if all of the other attributes of that entity are seemingly identical. So that's what the primary key is all about. It's a very important part of Access and database design, and we'll be looking at that more in future trainings. We're going to make the branch ID the primary key. Basically what we're declaring there is that we're never going to have two records with the very same branch ID. What we specify as the branch ID will always be unique. All of the other stuff is going to describe that one branch ID. Every branch ID might have a manager, but one manager could be in charge of multiple branches. So the one thing that makes that branch ID unique is going to be that name, that short text that we put in for that record. And that's what makes it a primary key. It gives us the ability to quickly look up that one specific entity. We never want to be unsure of what data we're looking at. So now we're going to modify the properties of this, and we're going to make sure that that field, when we type in a branch ID, it can never be more than 5 characters. This can be handy so that we don't accidentally put too much data in there or the wrong data, but it also is going to reduce the size of our database, because Access doesn't have to dedicate 255 characters every time we put in a branch ID. We can have that be only 5 characters because we know that we can make a unique branch ID for this particular scenario. I mean, we would know behind the scenes about our company and so on. We'd know enough that 5 characters should be enough for any branch ID ever. So we're going to change the caption property of the manager. We'll click on manager. We're going to change this caption to manager's name. We might do this because when we're typing in data, if we see manager, we might think maybe it's the manager ID, maybe it's the manager's job title. No, we want manager name. So we're going to put in that caption as we're working with this. We're going to make a new field after location, and it's going to be start date. And the type of data that we want to put in there is going to be date time. We want to make sure that every time anything is entered in here, we're not just treating it like characters typed in on a keyboard. It has to fit and look like a date time type of data. And we'll press tab so that my IT lab can pick up that we've made the correct change. We're going to view this branch table in datasheet view. Right now we're still in the design view. We're going to switch over to the datasheet view. You can right click and choose datasheet. And we're going to enter 12/3/2014 as the manager's start date for the first record in the table. Okay, so 12/3/2014. And we'll press enter. And you'll notice that it has to go in as a date. If you were to try to type it in just as numbers, it's not going to work quite the same. We're forcing our data entry to be more exact, and we're forcing that data entry to give us exactly what we're expecting to see. It reduces human error. That's really the main thing that it's doing for us, and it ensures consistency. You've probably been to a website before where it asks for your phone number, but it forces you to type it in area code and then maybe a dash and then the first 3 digits and a dash and then the last 4 digits. That's because we want to guarantee that everybody's typing that in the same. Okay, we're going to begin the process to import an Excel workbook. You can bring in Excel data and dump it right into Access. Sometimes creating the data in Excel and then importing it into Access makes life a little bit easier. We're going to browse for the exact file that we want, and it's this Excel file right here. We'll say open. We're not going to get into all of the differences with all of these, but what we can see here is we're going to just copy that data into a new table in the database. There's a couple other options. We can append to an existing table. Maybe this is just more data to toss in to the branch table from what we already have. Or we can link this. So that way the Excel sheet is going to be where our data really lives. And then we're just going to point to it from within Access. That way, if we make a change in Excel, it's updated in Access. If we make a change in Access, it's updated in Excel. And you're going to see a lot more of this linking go on in the real world, because we don't want different data in different places. We don't want our Excel to say one thing and our Access to say something else. So we usually try to have our data only in one place. That's considered best practice. We'll say OK to this. And when you're doing this import, you'll notice the top row is detected as our headings. These are going to be the fields that are automatically created in this new table. And here's all the data that's associated with it. We'll say next. And in this particular case, we want to make sure that when this data is imported, the CID is a unique field. Duplicates are not okay. We can't have 2 customer IDs that are the same number. It kind of goes back to having 2 people with the same social security number or 2 people with the same driver's license. It needs to be considered a unique ID. And then we can just, we'll click next. And we're actually going to choose a primary key here as the CID. If we let Access do this, it's going to try to create an additional field in here. And that's usually not what we want if we already have good data. So we're going to choose our own primary key, and in this case, that's going to be the CID. And we're going to import that to the table customers. We don't need to save the import steps, but if we wanted to, if we had to do this again for some reason, we can actually save those steps. So now we have a customers table and a branch table. We're going to import from an Access database an additional table. And this is the same kind of situation. We can choose to link the data, or we can just copy it in. And that's really what we're doing here. So we're going to choose to copy in that data, and we'll say OK. And we're going to choose the accounts table to bring in, and we'll say OK. And we don't have to save the import steps. In this next step, with the customer table open in Design View, we're going to change the CID field to be named Customer ID. This isn't something that I would recommend you do just all the time. Usually once your field names are set, leave them alone. But in this case, we just imported this table and we want to customize it for this particular application. And we'll tab off so my IT lab can recognize that we've made the change. And we're going to apply the default phone number input mask to the phone field properties. Highlight phone, and we are going to put in a phone style input mask. We're going to make sure that even though we're working with short text here, we always have the ability to force our users to put in a phone number like entry. We're just going to use the default, so we don't even need to click next to the rest of the wizard. We can just click finish and that'll take effect. Now the only way you can type in a phone number is precisely as a phone number format, not just any old text or any old number. Now we're going to add a new record. This is going to be 30011, and we'll put in the first name and the last name, and the rest is going to populate. So we're just adding in new data here. And now we're going to create some relationships. Click on the relationships button, and we are going to add in these tables. We're going to say show table, and we're going to add in accounts, branch, and customers in that order. And then we can say close. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a one-to-many relationship between the branch ID and in the branch table as well as the branch ID in the accounts table. We have the same data in both places. Why? Well, this defines our branches. This defines our accounts. Some accounts are going to belong in a particular branch. More than one account can belong to a particular branch. But what if we need to change the manager on all those accounts? Well, we define the branch one time, and then we can simply link that branch ID together between these two, and we can make sure that the data is always current for all of our accounts. So we'll take the branch ID and drag it from branch to accounts. And this is going to create a one-to-many relationship. For every one branch ID that exists, it can have it can have 0, 1, or many different accounts associated with it. We're also going to enforce referential integrity here, and we're going to see how that works in the next step. We're going to go in and create a new record. You might need to scroll down if your resolution's kind of small. And we're going to put in all of this data. 30003, and then the branch is going to be B60. The balance is 4,000, and the open date is going to be 4-13-2016. And then we'll press enter. We get an error, and we should, because we can't add or change a record because a related record is required in table branch. What does this mean? There is no B60 in our branch table yet. We're trying to specify a branch in our account that doesn't exist in our branch table. This is what that referential integrity is all about. We can't define something here unless it's already defined in that one of the one-to-many relationship, which is in that branch table. So we must specify, well, if we wanted a branch 60, we could create a branch 60 and define all of its attributes. And then we can put this in. But we can't lead by putting it in here first. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to change it to 50, and we're going to press the down arrow so my IT lab can recognize that our data is saved, and then that is acceptable. Because we do have a B50, we did not have a B60. Here we're going to create a query. We're going to use the query wizard, and we're just going to do a simple query here. We're going to add in from the accounts table the account ID, the customer ID, the branch ID, and the balance in that order. We'll click next. We'll make sure this says detail. It's going to show every field of every record. And then we'll click next again, and we are going to name that accounts from campus branch. You're going to see what that means in just a second here. Now, a query is like a table. It's like a way to look at the data in a table or multiple tables. So what we're going to do here for this accounts from campus branch, we're going to put in the branch ID as B50 as the criteria. So the only data that's going to be returned is the accounts that are from branch ID B50. It's kind of like what we did in Excel with filtering, where we would filter only B50. But in this case, we're building a query which is going to be the same view as a table, but it can have a mishmash of all kinds of data customized in. Think of the tables as where your data lives, and think of the queries as special ways to view that data in particular cross-reference methods. Okay, so we're going to set this query to sort the account ID in ascending order, and then we're going to run the query. And we're going to see these are in ascending order, and only branch 50 appears. In the accounts from campus branch query, create the balance for account ID. We're going to change this for 1020. We're going to add in another 0. We're going to make it 12,000 and press enter. And we're going to close our query. Right click and close. And now we're going to open our accounts table, and we're going to see that that did change. It's an automatically updated piece. 1020 automatically updated. Even though we changed it here, it still makes the change in our real data over here in our tables. We're going to add a new record, 1028 30005. B50 is a branch. Whoops. B50 is a branch. And 8,000 as our balance. And our 8/4/2016. And then press enter. So there's another new record in B50. We can open the accounts from campus branch query, and we can see this new 1028 30005 is there. Again, if you change it in one place, it automatically changes it in the other place. We're really looking at one piece of data, just in different ways. We're going to add the branch table in here into our query. This is one of those situations where you can use multiple tables of data to make queries, and you can pull that data in. And the reason that works is because of those relationships. We've already linked accounts and branch because they're linked between having the same branch IDs. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to show our tables, and we can actually double click or click and say add for the branch table, and there's that relationship. The reason these can exist in the same query is because we know that when we're talking about a particular branch, we can pull this information back up. So we're going to drag the location field from the branch table to the first empty column. You can left click drag, and in this case we're going to have campus be our criterion in the location field. I'll tab so my IT lab recognizes the change, and then we can clear the show checkbox under the branch ID, and we can delete this criterion. we've effectively done the same thing. If B50 is campus, we can specify it that way, or we can specify it as B50. If that is similar data, it's the same thing. We're going to make a new query using the query design view. We're going to add accounts, branch, I'm just double clicking these, and customers, and then say close. From the customers table, we're going to add last name, first name. Notice, even though they're different order up here, my IT lab wants them in the other order. And accounts table, we're going to add in the balance field. To the right, you can just double click these. And from the branch office, we're going to add in the location field. So we've got stuff from customers, we've got stuff from accounts, we've got stuff from branch. Even though it all seems like it doesn't make any sense together, it does because of these relationships. We're going to modify the balance criteria that says less than or equal to 1,000. You don't need the dollar sign. And we're going to run the query. Oops, I have to tab off of that so it detects it. And I'll run the query. Somewhere something isn't quite right. Oops, I've got greater than, less than, or equal to 1,000. And we'll run that query. And we're going to go back and modify the criteria for the balance. Go back to design view. Oops, nope, I've already done that. And we run the query. Now we just need to save it. This is just right click and save. Balance 1,000 or less. And it must be exactly like that, capitalized appropriately. From the accounts table, we'll add the open date field to the right of location field. We can just double click on it, or you can left drag it over. We're going to modify the criteria for open date. It's going to be actually, let me take a step back. It's going to display accounts opened on or after. So it's going to be greater than or equal to 1/1/2011. And then I'll just hit tab so my IT lab recognizes it, and I'll run that query. Only the ones that fit those criteria will now display. And that's really what querying is all about. It's different views of the same data. Add the customer ID field and the account ID and run the query. Well, in this case it's pretty simple. Here's all of our account IDs, here's all of our customer IDs, and just quickly looking at this you can see that we have a one-to-many relationship. Every account ID, every customer, which is actually the one in the relationship, can have many account numbers. So the 30001 can have many accounts. Every one customer can have 0, 1, or many accounts. We're going to go back to the design view, and we're going to show the total row. Just click up here. We're going to change the group by in the total row of the account ID field to count. This is going to fundamentally change how this view looks. Now we're going to have all of the unique customer IDs and the number of accounts they have rather than the actual value for those accounts. So this one is a much different view than the others. We'll play around with this more as we go forward into some of the more advanced querying and custom querying in Chapter 3.